Welcome to One with the Other Way, a podcast about your journey and finances. I'm your host, James. Today we have Peggy and Wanda with us, and this is our second episode talking about life events. And we're going to talk about starting a family, maybe adding some pets. We have statistics that we've been kind of going over to prep for this. A lot of dollar sign amounts for different costs. But Wanda, I figured like the best place to start is, okay, you want to expand the family. What should you do? Should you talk to a financial advisor first? Or I'm assuming have a conversation with your partner. Where do we start?
This is going to be a broken record for me. You start with the financial advisor always, every time, anytime you're thinking about it. Truly, I think there's 3 points we want to make today, right? The time versus money, the ongoing expenses versus a lump sum for children. And then I was thinking, I like to make sure we cover 3 things and only 3 things, and then leave pets all by itself because pets are becoming so very important to us and really, truly members of our family. So that becomes topic number 3.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so you frequently hear about the time value of money. And so when you're thinking about expanding your family, it not only involves the money, but it also involves the time. And as we talk about the different things involved with expanding the family, I think that we'll cover some of this time, whether it's lump sum time or regular amounts of time or over a lifetime. So then let's talk about money. There's 2 big chunks of money that come out right away and that everybody's usually very aware of. One is the actual cost of having a baby. And that can vary anywhere from $3,000 up to $20,000. And that's a one-time cost. And most people are like, yes, we're going to have a baby, and that's going to cost medical, and then they will address it and talk about it. And then there is on the other side of the arc when the child flies the coop and goes off to college. And so you will see a lot of costs associated with that. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail on that. But I think somewhere around, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it about $36,000 for college costs?
Yes, roughly.
Okay.
Not just tuition, but the room and board, the books, everything. That's the average.
Right. So there's this arc, right? So you have these 2 anchors on either side, and then you have all the in-between things. So Credit Karma actually says that if a couple has 2 children, it costs about $235,000 per child from here to there, $235,000.
And so that's going
to, right, up to 17 years. That's not including college, right? Yeah, and that's going to impact your retirement, right? So talking to a financial advisor is important because $250,000 is a lot of money. That does impact you quite a bit. And so once we got the big costs on either side, then we have the in-between costs. And I'm surprised people don't realize how expensive, for example, diapers cost. Depending on what kind of diaper you use, somewhere between $60 and $100 a month. And this is kind of a little bit of a pet peeve in that I'm an environmentalist and I'm, concerned about the environment. Baby diapers actually hit the landfills, which they make up 2% of what's in the landfill. But naturally, diapers is a disposable thing for most people, and that's going to cost about $100 a month. And then the other thing that I found interesting was, and there's a lot of thoughts about this, is baby formula. Feeding the baby, right? Initially, that can cost somewhere between, and this is another one, right? Because I'm thinking it's probably closer to $300 a month, so $100 to $300 a month.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting too, because, and maybe either parents that are currently in it probably know these costs more, but people who don't have kids yet, they go through diapers like crazy. You don't see those costs until they start happening. And I feel like it's very easy to underestimate how much you actually need. It sounds like it can add up quickly.
Talking to a financial advisor, we've experienced those things. We know what that does to the family budget. And so, you're thinking about having a baby, very sweet love. And we can just say, okay, here's some considerations so you can plan for it, so you can be prepared for it.
I don't care how much planning you do. You're not going to be prepared for it. This brings up a question I wanted to ask. So in all of your years of financial planning, how many families have actually come to you and said, we're thinking of having a baby? What do we need to do?
That's interesting because over the years, that topic is coming up more and more. It used to be, no one ever told me. But in the last 4 or 5 years, people start talking about it. And probably I ask the question when people are starting a relationship together and say, hey, so, looking down the road, what does the future look like for you? Do you think you have children? And I prompt that question more often than not. But more and more people are talking to me about that. And it didn't used to be the case. I agree with you, Peggy. So I'm interested in if that's maybe a change in me or a change in what we see out there in social media and that kind of thing. Something you said, though, you will never be prepared to have children. I totally agree with you. And you cannot overemphasize it. It will happen and it will be totally not what you expect, right?
So I think it's great to discuss what's going to happen when you have a baby, right? So discussing that will actually help you to prepare. And maybe you want to have that discussion before you're pregnant, but I feel like more often than not, the discussion comes when the pregnancy happens. And that's great if now, because we're prompting that question with our clients about younger couples and newly married couples, that kind of stuff, it's good maybe to have the conversation a little bit earlier. But everything in your life changes when you have a baby. Everything changes, right? I mean, okay, maybe your favorite ice cream doesn't change, but well, I mean, it might if
Yeah,
you're the one
it
who
might.
had the actual baby. Sometimes
Yeah.
you actually have a
It
food
might
that it's like, I
change.
could never eat that again. But, for the most part, everything else in your life changes. Your housing needs change, your grocery needs change, all these additional expenses change. I mean, everything changes. And so that's what I'm saying. It's great to prepare for some things that you can prepare for. Like, obviously, well, we're going to need additional space. We have a 1 bedroom. Baby can stay with us in our room, whatever, for however long, but eventually. So those are all great things. And obviously that's a great discussion and planning tool to talk to your financial advisor. But just know that you're going to have tons of things that you had no idea, didn't even occur to you. You'll buy clothes for your baby, they'll wear them one time.
Yep.
That's actually the next one, right? And I was thinking, Peggy, you should have taken lead on this topic because out of the three of us, you're the only one with real experience. But then, as you say, right, the food needs changes, right? But then the clothing need changes, right? And they grow so fast. And what is good for them, this month, right? By next month, they're already growing out of it. And that clothes need is for the rest of their life with you. Right? It'll be new fashions, it'll be new sizes, it'll be new grades.
Well,
And
it's ridiculously expensive too.
they estimate about $100 a month while your child is under your roof for clothing needs.
Yeah, I guess that could be true.
Yeah. And
Which is
jeans.
still kind of crazy
Just
to
growing.
think about.
It's absolutely
Mhm.
insanity. And so then you have all the clothing, the little clothing, the big clothing, and then you have childcare.
Oh my gosh. We looked at those costs because we're expecting it's expensive.
What did you
Childcare
find,
is,
James? What did you
we
find?
found, I mean, even for like the lower end is still
Mhm.
like $500 to $800 a month for it. For the normal is like $1,500 to $2,000 a month for
Right.
childcare.
Right. And then you got to think about your childcare needs as a parent too, right? Because I'm sure you're thinking about this already because of I know you and the type of family you are. This person is potentially spending more time with your child's waking hours than you are.
Yes. We
And
care a
so
lot
that
about that too.
that makes that person very, very important in the life of your child. And so there's a lot of research that goes into that.
That's why we've even considered nannies. It's also an expense, but it's different because we have more say over who that person would be, as opposed to a daycare. It could be a rotating, like,
Mhm.
teachers, I guess.
There are two things there, right? Is one of them is the time. This person spends more time with your child potentially than you do. And so you want to really candidly look at whether or not it's worthwhile for you to be working outside the home vis-a-vis doing childcare, arguably the most important thing any of us will do in our lifetime. Talking the numbers with a financial advisor can give you clarity in terms of should you actually be working outside the home, or is it in the family's best interest for you not to be working outside the home? And I've helped some families actually come to the conclusion that no, the money I make is not worth having somebody else raise my child during those years where I'm learning to walk and talk and I'm becoming a little human being. And so taking the emotion out of it and talking to an advisor can help determine whether or not you're in that situation, if it's important for you to actually be paying childcare. And I'm going to just raise another statistic. You're looking about 800. It's very interesting. Of course, different parts of the country cost different amounts, but actually childcare can cost upwards of $5,000 a month.
Yes.
And 1 in 5 of us pay more than $1,000 a month for it.
Jeez.
$12,000 a year. And so again, looking at the numbers to determine whether or not it is worth going through a childcare thing, because it is not only the mechanics and the time, or it's not only the mechanics of childcare and someone taking care of your child, it's also the amount of stress on the family.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to run over here. I'm going to get a late fee. It also adds stress to the family. I'm going to eat more fast food because I don't have time. I'm too tired to cook. I'm not getting enough sleep. And so again, this is a time thing.
I think that's an important thing to discuss with the financial advisor, because you're right. I know of some particular clients that you worked with where you did discuss that. Mm-hmm. And I thought that that was a really great idea, and to have that discussion, because you can do a lot of different things. I know that early on when I was having my third child, my husband worked nights and I worked days. And we did that specifically to limit the daycare needs. We still had to have daycare, right? Because, I mean, he had to sleep when he came home. But because of the crossover, he would get home in the very, very early hours of the morning. I would go to work, take the kids to daycare. He could pick them up early. So it limited our amount of daycare. And then there are other options that you could do too, because some parents, can work at home and you can have flexible hours when you do that kind of thing. So I think having that discussion about your income versus your new expenses is a really important thing that we could help to have that discussion outside of the emotion of the whole, child thing and the stress of having a child. It's very stressful when you have a child. And as we know, money is a huge stressor in every marriage. Well, I guess maybe not every marriage. If you're lucky enough to be, a billionaire or something, money probably wouldn't be a stressor in your marriage. But as we know, sometimes it is, right? Because they're like, oh, this is blood money. Anyway, I think that that's important to say, that we can have that conversation. So, I mean, all of those different expenses about having a child. Maybe you're going to adopt a child, so there's a whole different set of expenses. Mm-hmm. And having that conversation also with your financial advisor, again, is just going to help you to take a step back, because we're not in the middle of the emotion of it.
I'll add one more thing too. I mean, you also got to think about people who go through fertility treatments too, and that's an expense.
Oh yeah, expensive.
Yeah.
And that's a change in landscape now too.
Yep.
That is still an expensive landscape, but
yeah.
Yeah. So then,
all right. So I think that that's a lot with the kids.
How do you start saving for that?
I don't know about saving for it, but planning for it, right? Okay. Where am I going to get the money for this? If I'm doing this and not that?
Right. I agree. Because you're already hopefully you're already saving.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. In your regular financial plan. So then it's a matter of a discussion of, we're going to have a baby in 3 years. Maybe we should be saving more now. Or, but you're already saving. So it's right. It's where does the money come from?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting just on the where is the money coming from. I've had couples where they've invested one of the couple's entire paychecks. And it helps with this concept of detachment, right? We're frequently too attached to the things around us, the things that money buys and that kind of thing, and having a detachment from that money. And for many times I'll be like, it's not possible. It can't be done. But actually, median income in America is $56,000. And, you find that you can live on less than you think if you're not going to the Starbucks or going out to eat on a regular basis. And again, I don't know necessarily that you can save for it, but you can actually potentially save in that, not spend the money to see how little you can live on. So that gives you your options moving forward into having a child. Going back to this arc, right? Then we have so we started over here on the baby, the big expense at the hospital, and then you're going to the college, right? So a median cost around $37,000 all in, tuition, books, place to live, that
per
kind
year,
of thing.
Right? And you got
per year. per year. Going to college is its own language. You have 529, Pell Grant, subsidized, unsubsidized, Stafford, FAFSA. I mean, like everything that you can think of has its own acronyms. And so a lot of the schools will do sessions regarding it. Yet as financial advisors, we're very familiar with the process, right? You must do a application for federal student aid, no matter who you are, if you want to be considered for any type of money sourcing. And that is done in January, although my understanding is I think the current administration hasn't gotten the FAFSA out. And so there's some consternation. I saw that on the internet. You must do that in order to get considered for any kind of grant, scholarship, any of that stuff. So that's kind of the first thing. And then many of you will hear about 529, of course. And we're going to talk more about paying for college in another podcast. But basically, briefly, a 529 is a trust account set up tax-free to go to the children for college only, college and books only, must be used by the time they're 30. And the last Secure Act actually allows it now to be used for an IRA for your child. So a lot more usefulness in it. These things change over time. And again, we stay current with, our continuing ed in terms of the things that we can use to pay for college and the things we can do for our children. I mentioned 529. Uniform Gift to Minors Act is another vehicle that can be used. Investment accounts is another vehicle. Again, we'll talk more in detail on that on a financial advisor. So that kind of is the arc, right, of having a child. This side, the big expense, this side, and then all those expenses. $250,000.
Yeah. But another big part of having a family that we didn't talk about that I think it's important to just mention briefly is when you have a family, your insurance needs change.
Yeah.
And then your documentation and you're preparing for, unforeseen events change as well. And that is also something that we're familiar with and that we might bring up and say, we should talk about this. And I think that that's a thing that a lot of people, young people, especially when you're in the middle of this huge event, may not think about. And that's part of planning for a family too.
Well, it's like, adding to your emergency fund as your family expands, because you have a third person that's going to have risk.
But Peggy brings up a good point. And when you're younger, you don't necessarily think, okay, if something happens to me, what happens to the child? And this is on the financial side and on the time side, right? Who's going to take care of the child? And how's that going to be paid for, those two things? So again, it's a risk factor, something we'll address when we're talking about risk.
Would it be smart then for everyone who immediately is going to expand their family to go ahead and write up a will for that?
Immediately. That's so much pressure.
You should put something in black and white. And you should talk about it. Actually, most importantly, the spouse and you need to have a discussion about where the child goes and who pays for that, because I'm surprised when I'm asking them in appointments where they haven't had the discussion, because we're going to live a long time, so we want to live a long time yet, however, right, if life doesn't cooperate with us. But you should at least be in agreement about where the child goes and how that's being paid for. And then if you write it down, that's worth something. Wills are designed to go through probate. And if you pass, it is an uncomfortable thing for all involved, because you have two sets of in-laws who may think different things. We can say it that way. Different expectations. And having false expectations isn't healthy for the child.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyway, like you said, we can discuss that in our risk thing. But I just thought it was important to mention that that's just another consideration that I think a lot of young families, you're so caught up in the moment of the joy of having a child and then the worry about being a parent and this life that you're now responsible for and all of that, that sometimes, even though these are really important decisions and things to have taken care of, they kind of take the back burner.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and we're going to talk about those in appointments.
Yeah.
Right. And so, an impartial, non-emotionally involved third party can help sometimes to say, oh, well, have you thought about this?
Well, now I think it's good to move into the more fun part that I feel like people, pets,
Pets.
Now, I know it's kind of funny.
Great.
I know it's kind of funny, you're talking about people who don't always communicate, or maybe they are starting to communicate more when they're starting to plan around families. But I feel, at least I can speak for myself here, we didn't tell our financial advisor when we were getting a dog. how common is it for people to surprise you saying, "Hey, we got a pet,"
Pets are a different thing for me because pets I don't anticipate in any way, shape, or form. Maybe I should, given how important it is to Americans these days, apparently.
Well, how expensive it is.
That's right, how expensive it is.
I'm learning that currently as we speak.
Yeah, see, and if you had talked to your financial advisor before, you would have known.
Just the knowing, right? But you had mentioned there's really two ways of getting a pet, right? Through rescue and through breed. In this group, we have people who've done both ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did one rescue and one breed, so I'm like a mix.
I've done both as well. I've bought from breeders and I've rescued.
Yeah.
I advocate for rescues. And if I do a breeder, then I always do the research on the breeder because I don't agree with just having a dog to make money off of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Knowing what I know now, I really would suggest looking at a rescue, merely because statistically, and I bought a breed dog not knowing, but statistically, the number of dogs and cats that are put down is horrible. And the fact that they did not come into this world willingly, like they came in and to put them down is just, we can do better. So
I rescued an AKC registered black lab from the dog pound.
Yeah. So
I didn't know she was AKC. I just went in there. We picked her. We, met her, talked to her, all that. And when I was leaving, they handed me her AKC papers.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. But you never know. And right now at the animal shelter I just saw this morning, absolutely beautiful, fat-headed black lab. It's been there for 2 days. It's not adoptable yet because they just found it. I'm just thinking, oh my goodness. And there's so many huskies too. So I really think you should go to the shelter if you can. But anyway, back to the expenses and planning for a pet.
Off the pontification and the moralizing onto the expense of it. So a lot of people are asking the questions after they get the pet, normally not before, about insurance. Should I get insurance? And again, I feel like we'll talk more about that on risk assessment. Generally, you want to get insurance if you do not or cannot cover the cost of whatever it is that is happening. Generally, you'll have hospital, vet expenses that are normal, routine, and then you'll have expenses because your dog ate something or broke something. So getting a cost from your vet about, what the various things would cost you can give you a marker as to whether you need to get insurance. If you can cover the cost with your pay cash account, with your savings, then you don't need to get insurance. It's an extra expense. It's not necessary. Yet if you cannot cover it, I think sometimes we're insuring so much so. Like insurance has a bad rap for many good reasons. However, it's necessary for the things that we cannot cover day to day, risks that we're exposed to in our life. Yet it seems that if you have a pet, it seems that you should be able to cover those expenses with your cash flow. If you can't, right, and maybe this is need to look objectively with your financial advisor. Okay, do I need to buy some pet insurance?
Yeah, but I think that several years ago we had looked up what it costs for the average healthy dog, right? The expenses of having an average healthy dog, I think it was like 3 to 5 years ago, Wanda, weren't we talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was like $1,200 at that time. Mm-hmm. That's just for a dog that is healthy and its average cost $1,200. That's $100 a month. So can you afford $100 a month? And then are you getting an average healthy dog? And sometimes you don't know, right? What I spent on my dog in the first year was insane. She's doing much better now, by the way, but you don't know sometimes. And so just knowing that, like, it breaks my heart when people get a dog and you love the dog and all of that, and then they can't take proper care of it because the dogs need things. They need regular vet appointments. They need quality food. I think that
they need exercise. They need to get out. They need to play.
Yeah, that's the time aspect of it. Yeah, making sure that you have time in your schedule for a pet.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But don't take your pet to the shelter because you say you don't have enough time for it. Find some time, because that's another thing that people do. Oh, she just sits at home all day. Okay, well, now you took her to the shelter. Now she sits all day in a concrete cell.
Yeah.
How
And
is
she's
that
probably
better?
going to get put down. And she's probably going to get put down. So.
Right. So that's a horrible excuse. I can't stand that one. But time is something also that you have to have with your animal. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just knowing that you have to have, I think, a minimum of $100 a month to pay for food, shots. I mean, you're going to have to get, when you get the leashes, tags, toys. Yeah. But tags and stuff too, right? Like the counties, different counties have different amounts. I mean, I think I pay $35 or $40 a year to register my dog to be in the county. What do you pay, James?
Nothing.
Oh, nice. See, you're
North Carolina.
Not that
North
I,
Carolina.
if we paid something, it was like through like maybe the fees of when we got like his rabies shot tag, but I don't remember having anything that was, oh, to be a registered pet, you know.
right. We have registrations in our counties that we have to register with the county, our dogs, so that it's every year you have to pay a fee. And if it's an altered animal, so if it's fixed, it's less. So
they use the word altered.
They do use the word altered. Yes. Yes.
So you get a discount for altered peoples.
Yeah. Well, and you can't, in some cities, it's actually your pet has to be altered. You're not allowed to breed your pet unless you have filed a specific breeder's permit.
Mm.
So anyway, but those are all things that you should consider when you're getting a pet, huh?
None of those backwards people trying to sell.
No backyard breeders. That's right.
No. There's another thing, right, that people are not familiar with is you may not be able to get homeowner insurance
with certain breeds. Well, they don't cover the dog. Like you get the insurance to cover your house, but if your dog bites somebody, they exclude specific breeds. Yeah. And it's horrible, the breeds they exclude too, because some of them do not deserve that designation at all.
The owner maybe deserves the designation.
That's right. The owner definitely deserves it with every breed. It's the owner's fault, not the dog, but that's a whole nother soapbox.
Well, that's another, I was going to say about like training of a dog.
If you don't training, that's another expense for your dog.
That's another expense. The amount of people I see in our whole neighborhood area, like you can tell when people have a well-trained dog versus a poorly trained dog.
Who talks about me like that?
You can imagine my dog was very well trained.
Well, it's just that you can tell between the ones that are walking their dog and their dog stays on their side versus the ones where they're like being pulled by their dog everywhere they go. And we're working really hard to train our dog, and we've done most of our training by ourselves. But we have sent our dog to like daycare school in a way, you know, to get some extra training from a professional trainer. And that can add up. You know, we tried to keep it at a very minimum amount, but I knew people that would take their dog and like our dogs would play, and they were sending that dog almost every day to get training, and that was like $60 a day.
Okay. And then I'm going to say something else back to the training thing. Yes, you're right. It is a cost. If you don't want to invest the time, right? It goes back to the time. Yet if you are going in and having them trained, the most important person to be trained is actually you. And if you don't take the training to heart and bring it home and get the training that you need to be a responsible owner, that's also a problem. Because I have some dogs that have gone to beautiful training and then they come home and they're a mess.
Yeah.
Because the owners haven't been trained. And sometimes I don't think people recognize you have to be trained too, because you've never had a pet probably. So it's like,
Well, and then even people have had pets their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you've had a pet your whole life, it doesn't mean that you are a good pet owner.
No.
That's true. Not that we're getting in the judgment side, but yes, it's true. You might not be one of those that really needs to be a pet owner. I think we covered a lot when we were talking about starting a family today. I think we started with the idea that it's time versus money, right? It's also time and money, a lot of them overlapping there. And then having a child, which is probably the most important thing people do when they're starting their family, you know, from the medical to the day-to-day expenses, all the way to the end to college and hopefully setting them free and launching them, as they say, and then pets.
Well, thank you for listening to One Went the Other Way. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to hear more, you can find us on financesforlife.com. You can schedule an appointment if you want to talk to Wanda or Peggy about starting a family, by getting a dog, or anything. You're welcome to schedule an appointment. We post our podcast every 2 weeks on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. So follow us there to stay up to date. And we hope to see you in the next episode. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Finances for Real Life, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.